These outboards were so extreme that racing officials had no choice but to shut them down. Engines that over-revved past safe limits, ripped hulls apart, blew gear cases at full speed, and pushed boats into dangerous, uncontrollable lift. But here's the truth. Every one of these banned motors forced new safety rules, new engineering standards, and a new era of high-performance design. Today, you're about to see the engines that redefine the limits of power by crossing them. The OMC V8 wasn't built for racing, it was built for intimidation. Imagine dropping a full-blown V8 onto the back of a lightweight tunnel boat. That's not engineering, that's mischief. The moment OMC unleashed it, every other manufacturer basically said, "Yeah, we're not beating that." On the water, this thing didn't accelerate, it launched. Drivers described the torque hit like being kicked in the chest by a horse with anger issues. Even the sound was ridiculous, a deep V8 roar echoing across lakes like someone mixed NASCAR with a hurricane. The UIM eventually stepped in because speeds were getting out of control. Boats were flying, flipping, and doing everything except staying politely in the water. So they banned it from Formula One racing entirely. Too big, too powerful, too extreme, and honestly, too fun while it lasted. This engine was so strange and ahead of its time that even engineers had to sit down and breathe into a paper bag. A rotary outboard, a Wankel, revving higher than anything else in the race world. It didn't purr, it shrieked like a jet engine trapped in a blender. And the power curve? Completely unfair. While piston engines were working hard, the rotary just spun faster and faster like it was wired directly into chaos. Drivers loved it, competitors didn't. Race officials really didn't. The UIM eventually banned all rotary engines from competition. Not just this one, the entire technology. It wasn't a "you can't race that here" moment. It was a "never bring that thing back again" situation. Too much RPM, too smooth, too fast, and absolutely too terrifying for its era. The name alone already sounds illegal. The Evinrude Strangler was one of those engines that showed up, crushed everyone, and immediately raised suspicion. It was OMC's way of saying, what if we gave a lightweight race motor the personality of a bar fight? On the water, the Strangler was brutally strong. It didn't just pull, it yanked boats forward like it was dragging them out of danger. Racers using older engines didn't stand a chance. They'd look left, look right, and the Strangler was already halfway to the finish line. APA eventually stepped in and changed the rules so drastically that the Strangler became illegal almost overnight. It wasn't banned by name, but the new limits made sure it could never compete again. That's how you know an engine was extreme, when racing bodies bend reality to get rid of it. The Evinrude CCCV6 looked like someone took a normal outboard, fed it caffeine, and whispered "win at all costs" into its air intake. This thing was a purebred race machine, cross-flow, high compression, razor-sharp throttle response. It didn't want to go fast, it wanted to humiliate anything beside it. Drivers loved the CCC because it had that dangerous kind of power. The kind that made you feel like a champion for 3 seconds, and then question your life decisions in the next 3. And when it hit its power band, forget it. Competitors might as well have stayed at the dock. Then the rule book arrived. Class limits changed, weight limits changed, displacement changed. Basically, every regulation that could stop the CCC did. Overnight, it went from undefeated monster to illegal decoration. Not because it failed, but because it succeeded too well. If normal Evinrudes were polite, the XP GT second effort motors were their unhinged cousins. These weren't regular engines. They were factory-tuned troublemakers from OMC's legendary second effort performance division. Imagine certified engineers being paid to break rules creatively. That's what this program was. The XP/GT engines came with hotter ports, wilder compression, and setups that made race inspectors sweat. They looked stockish, but the moment you opened the throttle, the game was over. These engines hit so hard that classes suddenly had unexpected winners everywhere. APA eventually tightened the regulations until second effort engines technically didn't fit anywhere. Too modified, too powerful, too unfair. These motors weren't banned by a headline. They were killed slowly and quietly by rule changes designed specifically to make them disappear. Yamaha's V4 racing mods were the marine equivalent of a skinny kid who suddenly shows up at school bench pressing 300 pounds. Nobody expected them to be this quick. Yamaha tuned the V4 so aggressively that small race boats started doing speeds that made spectators lean back a little. The engine was lightweight, rev-happy, and hit its power curve like it was trying to escape the boat entirely. Drivers loved it because it made them feel invincible. Officials didn't share the enthusiasm, especially when hulls started dancing on the edge of blowover territory. After a few seasons of chaos, class organizers stepped in and said, "Nope." Several categories restricted or outright eliminated the Yamaha V4 racing mods because the speeds were getting too spicy for the hulls being used, too fast for the boat, too light to control, and too fun to survive the rulebook. The Yamaha 70 CES was one of those engines that looked innocent, until you put it on the back of a racing dinghy. Suddenly, that little 70-horse motor started acting like it had something to prove. High RPM, razor-sharp throttle, and a mid-range punch that made competitors double-check if Yamaha secretly snuck in extra cylinders. Racers loved it because it felt untouchable. It revved cleaner, climbed quicker, and pushed lightweight hulls to speeds they had no business attempting. Watching a CES-powered boat fly across the water was like watching a Chihuahua outrun a German Shepherd. Confusing, hilarious, and slightly terrifying. But the speed advantage was too real. The CES started outperforming everything in its displacement bracket, and race officials don't like unfair. So when class structures changed across Europe, the 70 CES suddenly didn't qualify for anything. It wasn't banned, it just got rule-booked out of existence. The DT140SS was Suzuki's short-run attempt to prove they could make a race-bred two-stroke that punched way harder than the badge suggested. It was light, sharp, and built for aggressive high RPM performance. Basically, it was Suzuki saying, "Yeah, we can be wild too." On the water, this thing snapped boats forward with instant power. It didn't feel like 140 horsepower, more like an angry 175 that hadn't slept. Racers loved it because it brought real heat into a category that desperately needed excitement. But then the rules shifted. Racing bodies tightened displacement, weight, and modification limits. and the DT140SL suddenly didn't fit anywhere. Not too slow, too good. Suzuki didn't bother forcing it into new categories, they simply pulled it. An extreme idea that arrived early and left before the fun truly started. The Mercury T4 was Mercury racing waking up one morning and choosing violence. A 3-liter, 4-cylinder monster built for Formula One outboard racing. It wasn't just fast, it was unfair. The T4 had the kind of acceleration that made competitors stare at their own engines, wondering if something was broken. When the T4 hit the racing scene, it created a performance gap so large you could have driven a pontoon boat through it. Nobody else had anything close. The T4 screamed at insane RPM, threw water like a fire hose, and made F1 boats feel like rocket sleds. UIM eventually stepped in because the class had become Mercury versus physics. Rule changes were introduced, displacement limits tightened, and the T4 was effectively eliminated, not because it was unreliable, but because it would have won everything until the sun died. The Twister 2X is the kind of engine you build when you want everyone else to suffer. Mercury took the already ridiculous Twister 2, added even hotter ports, wilder timing, and modifications that absolutely did not care about anyone's safety. It was a hooligan in cowling form. On the water, this thing was pure chaos. The Twister 2X hit its power band like someone threw a grenade into the crankcase. Boats would leap forward, drivers would hold on for dear life, and spectators would wonder if they should clap or call the Coast Guard. Eventually, Mod VP and OPC classes rewrote the rules, and the IIX no longer fit the category it once dominated. It wasn't banned for blowing up, it was banned for blowing everyone else out of the water. When an engine forces an entire rulebook overhaul, you know it was extreme. The Mercury 1250 Super BP was already wild, but the stacker version, that was Mercury deciding boats weren't loud enough, dangerous enough, or dramatic enough. So they bolted megaphone exhaust pipes straight out the back, turned the volume to illegal, and told racers to hang on. When a Super BP lit up, you didn't just hear it, you felt it. The sound punched the air like a shotgun. People on shore covered their ears. Dogs ran away. Other racers looked over like, "Is that allowed?" And for a very short, beautiful moment, it was. Then came the bans. Racing bodies introduced strict noise limits and safety rules, and the open megaphone exhaust was the first casualty. The 1250 stackers were simply too loud, too chaotic, and too capable of shaking loose bolts, teeth, and possibly the will to live. Extreme? Absolutely. Allowed? Not anymore. British Anzani built engines that looked innocent until they hit the water and embarrassed everything around them. Their hot rod class motors were lightweight, brutally tuned, and screamed like they were running away from tax collectors. These engines were the underdog troublemakers of early racing. Racers used them because they were fast, responsive, and surprisingly durable for how hard they were pushed. But here's the issue. Anzani wasn't shy about modifying their units, and some versions showed up at races making suspiciously more power than the rulebook allowed. Inspectors were not amused. Over time, APBA stock class rules tightened, and many of the hotter Anzani builds were banned as non-conforming. Translation: this little British engine is way faster than it's supposed to be. And just like that, one of the most iconic outlaw motors disappeared from competition, but not from legend. These engines proved one thing. When outboards get too powerful, history remembers them even louder. If you enjoyed exploring the machines racing, tried to erase, hit subscribe and join us for more extreme marine stories every week. And trust me, the next video goes even deeper into the madness.